Alrighty, welcome back to the Front 7 Podcast. I am your host, Money Mike, and today is going to be a little bit shorter of a discussion. As I said, today's topic is going to be the overdrafting of quarterbacks by NFL teams. So, basically, what we've seen and what we know about the NFL is if you draft a quarterback and he becomes a bust, it sets your team back 3, 4 years, 5 years, and then you fall behind the rest of the league, and then you're trying to find yourselves a franchise quarterback to get you back into the contention of being in the playoffs. And as I said yesterday in my video about the Cleveland Browns, and will they bungle the 2017 draft, link in the description below. It's interesting to me, the Browns have been the one team that have been bitten by this bug where they overdraft quarterbacks, and they're always drafting quarterbacks every 3 or 4 years. And we've seen where teams can get into this rut of having no quarterback. They always find temporary short-term solutions and not long-term. You look at Arizona. They drafted Matt Leinart. He didn't work out, so they moved on. Kurt Warner took over, took us to the Super Bowl. After that, they've tried to find somebody. Eventually, they got Carson Palmer. And Arizona is probably one of those teams where they have mostly done it where they've looking for short-term solutions. Kurt Warner, Carson Palmer. And granted, Kurt Warner, that worked out. They got to a Super Bowl. But Carson Palmer, he's kind of declining. Now there's talk about the Cardinals possibly drafting Patrick Mahomes at 13 or drafting some quarterback at 13. So obviously the Cardinals are looking to find that long-term solution and getting away from a short-term solution. Now, to me, you also have to take a quarterback at the right time in the right draft, and it has to be the right prospect. We've seen it over the years where teams will constantly, every year we see this, every year, and it always boggles my mind. How is it we can have guys like a Brady Quinn, a Blaine Gabbert, a Christian Ponder, guys that go in the first round, never pan out, but they're drafted because of their position and because they play quarterback. So when will teams start to smarten up? Now, I said yesterday that I was not a fan of this draft class. I think personally next year's draft class is going to be a lot better. I think to me, teams should wait. But obviously, teams with quarterback need is going to take somebody this year in hopes that they can be the guy long term. But the problem with that is if you're drafting somebody just because he's a quarterback and because you need a quarterback, then are you really helping your team? Because for Arizona, they have to get to the Super Bowl. The window is closing. Palmer, Fitzgerald, they're going to be retiring soon. And Arizona has to get to the Super Bowl before that window closes, and then they're starting over, and they're in that rebuild. And I know teams hate that word, rebuild, but Arizona is close to that. I mean, you look at the free agents they lost this year. They lost some key free agents. They have an aging wide receiver in Larry Fitzgerald, aging quarterback in Carson Palmer. They are hitting that area where they are very close to hitting that rebuild and hitting the reset button on their franchise. And that may end up costing Bruce Arians because maybe Bruce Arians won't be there for the long term or won't be there when they start to lose because they're rebuilding, and now they're finding themselves drafting high every year because they don't have that quarterback, or because they've drafted somebody this year and he didn't pan out, and they're drafting somebody in 2008, 20, 21, whatever the case may be. As I said with the Browns, my problem here is Cleveland has wasted so many picks on quarterbacks just because of the need that the NFL has created for having a franchise quarterback being the only way you can be competitive in the NFL. And I hate that this is what the NFL has become, because the NFL has essentially forced teams to overdraft bad quarterbacks in order to try to find that franchise guy, when in reality, that quarterback is not the guy that will lead your franchise. And the Browns have been leading one since 1999 when they came back into the league. They have taken quarterbacks over superior talent at other positions. And as I stated before, you have to build the foundation of a team before you can get the owner, right? So you have to build the house before you sell it. So essentially, the Browns have been passing on guys. They've been neglecting the team to take a quarterback who has pretty much been, every quarterback they've taken has busted out. They've never mounted anything. And so the Browns are always back to square one at the end of each season, it seems like. And part of that is because they don't have much of a team outside of it, besides the quarterback. I mean, look, the quarterback thing that's an issue in itself. But the Browns have such a poor team, they don't have that foundation in place to where they can draft a guy and go and compete right away. And that's one thing teams don't really realize, is that they're drafting these quarterbacks without a solid foundation in place for them to be successful, and are setting the quarterbacks up for failure, thus setting themselves up for failure. The general manager is setting up the head coach to fail because the GM wanted to take that quarterback. Thus, the cycle of, well, the head coach gets fired, coaching staff is gone, new general manager. You get the picture, right? So essentially, we're going to see on Thursday night, we're going to see teams overdraft quarterbacks, and it's going to be a poor decision to do so. I mean, this is not a good quarterback draft class. I cannot stress that enough. I said it yesterday. When Mike Mayock is not even a fan of the quarterbacks, and somebody is telling Mayock that, hey, if the quarterbacks were drafted from the second round on, then it would be a great draft. That explains a lot. That says a lot about the draft class when it pertains to the quarterbacks. So, to me, the NFL has created this monster of the need to have a franchise quarterback in order to compete. No more can you get by on a great defense, a good running game, and a so-so quarterback. Now, we've phased out the running back. The rules constantly take away the defense's ability to play defense. And now we've come to the point where if you don't have a quarterback, you cannot compete in the NFL. And it's sad, and it's a sad state, to be honest, because the teams should be able to compete if they have a good defense, and a decent quarterback, and a good running game. But when that isn't enough, and the rules and the league has changed and evolved in such a negative way that teams are forced to compete, or forced to overdraft quarterbacks who aren't really going to be that good, and they go into systems that just don't fit them. And then new coaching staff comes in, new GM comes in. Well, that new GM is going to want his own quarterback. The new coach is going to want his own quarterback. So then that quarterback that was drafted under the previous regime, well, now he's out. He's out in the picture. He's being shuffled out. And now that first round pick that the team took on him is now wasted. And you've wasted 3 or 4 years hoping that he would be the guy. And now maybe one day teams will wisen up and they'll stop taking quarterbacks. And I mean poor quarterbacks, and overdrafting them. So maybe one day teams will smarten up and say, you know what, this is a terrible quarterback class. We'll wait for 2018 when the quarterbacks are going to be better, when there's a franchise quarterback in that draft to compare to this one. And, we're not going to set the team back. We're going to look elsewhere. We're going to draft maybe the offensive line. So maybe when you do find that quarterback, you will have a good solid offensive line in place. Good, maybe bookend tackles. Maybe you take a Cam Robinson, Ryan Ramczyk. Maybe you take a running back to give the quarterback some help in the running game. Because, again, as I said, the NFL has phased out the running backs. And just maybe the guys coming out in the draft in the recent years can kind of get the league back to that thinking of, hey, you know what, we can win with a good run game and a good defense. We don't need a good quarterback. But, again, the league has created this monster where you have to take a quarterback and you have to prioritize it over other needs. So you're neglecting these other positions on the team, and you're neglecting the team for one guy that you're hoping to pan out, and then when that quarterback doesn't pan out, you're stuck back at zero, square one, and you're still looking for a quarterback. So, essentially, will there be a day that teams will stop overdrafting quarterbacks? Probably not. As long as the rules continue to favor the quarterback and the passing league that has become, the NFL will continue to force teams to overdraft quarterbacks and force teams to have a 3-4 year setback waiting for this quarterback to develop and become the franchise quarterback they drafted him to be. And honestly, that's pretty much where this all started. The league has grown to this passing league where if you don't have a quarterback, you cannot succeed in the NFL. And until the rules change and give the defense a little bit more freedom, and the passing game is not as strong as it is, not as effective as it is now, then I think we're going to constantly see teams overdraft. And I think really, it costs general managers and head coaches jobs that they very well might have kept. Now, granted, sure, in some cases, like Ryan Grigson, where, the Colts were kind of not where they should have been after they drafted Andrew Luck. All these years later, the Colts are kind of not where they should be. So, when you have bad general managers, bad coaches, okay, you fire them and you look for better replacements. But when you see general managers and coaches that get fired due to the fact that they overdrafted quarterbacks just because of the need and because of the rules say you need a quarterback, then really, is it really your fault that the league has forced you to overdraft a quarterback and then end up being the reason why you got fired? Thursday night, we're going to see teams overdraft guys. The Browns are looking at taking Mitchell Trubisky number 1, even though probably most likely they will probably take him at 5 or 6. They have talked to the Jets, and the Titans are looking to trade down from 5. So it could be something where the Browns take Myles Garrett, and they're smart enough to do so at number 1, then come back at 5 and take Trubisky or Deshaun Watson, whoever they're wanting. It's looking more like Mitchell Trubisky at this point. It's going to be interesting to see how this draft pans out with the quarterbacks and how many are going to go in round 1 and who's going to be overdrafted, who will fall that maybe turned out to be good. It's going to be very, very interesting to watch on Thursday night. I've been your host, Money Mike. I'll be back more with the Front 7 podcast tomorrow as we continue towards the 2017 NFL Draft, which kicks off Thursday night. Stay tuned to my channel. Subscribe if you have not already subscribed. Always remember, hit that bell so you will be notified of every video I post, whether it's the Front 7 podcast, the Everything Else podcast, or even the Money List.